The morning sky over Seoul turned black without warning. Jin-ho was drinking coffee on his apartment balcony when the shadow fell across the city. He looked up and saw something that made his coffee cup slip from his hands and shatter on the concrete below. A massive ship hung in the air above the city. It was so large that Jin-ho could not see where it ended. The ship was dark metal with strange glowing lines running across its surface. More ships appeared over other parts of the city. Then the news reports started coming in from around the world. The same thing was happening everywhere. Tokyo, New York, London, Moscow, giant ships had appeared over every major city on Earth. Jin-ho had been a military engineer for 10 years before leaving the army to work for a construction company. His training kicked in immediately. He grabbed his phone and called his younger brother Taemin, who worked with computers in the city center. Taemin, are you seeing this? Jin-ho asked. Everyone is seeing this, brother. Taemin's voice was shaky. The internet is going crazy. No one knows what these ships are or where they came from. Jin-ho was about to respond when a new sound filled the air. It was a deep, powerful voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The voice spoke in perfect Korean, but Jin-ho somehow knew it was being heard in every language around the world. People of Earth, the voice said, we are the Corvani. We have come to bring order to your world. You have lived without proper guidance for too long. We are your new gods. Jin-ho felt a chill run down his spine. Gods? What kind of aliens called themselves gods? The voice continued. To show you our divine power, we will now demonstrate what happens to those who oppose gods. Jin-ho watched in horror as beams of bright light shot down from the ships. The beams hit military bases around Seoul. The explosions were unlike anything Jin-ho had ever seen. The bases simply disappeared, leaving nothing but smooth craters in the ground. No fire, no smoke, just gone. His phone rang. It was his friend Dong Hyeon, a Special Forces soldier. Jin-ho, you need to get out of the city, Dong Hyeon said. They just wiped out our entire command structure. Every military base in the country is gone. The government is in emergency meetings, but I think they're going to surrender. Surrender? Already? Jin-ho could not believe it. What choice do we have? They destroyed our military in minutes. The Americans tried to fight back. New York launched missiles at the ship over their city. The missiles just disappeared before they could hit. Then the aliens destroyed half of Manhattan. Jin-ho hung up and immediately started packing. If these aliens were as powerful as they seemed, the cities would not be safe. He needed to get his family to safety and figure out what was happening. The next 3 days were chaos. The world's governments did exactly what Dong Hyeon predicted. They surrendered. The aliens, the Corvani, landed in every major city. They were tall, thin creatures with pale skin and large black eyes. They wore flowing robes and carried staffs that glowed with the same light as their ships. The Corvani leader, who called himself High Regent Vextar, appeared on every television and computer screen in the world. He looked like the others but wore more elaborate robes and a crown of twisted metal. Humans of Earth, Vextar said, his voice cold and commanding, your old gods have failed you. Your governments have failed you. We have come to bring you the truth. We are your gods now. You will worship us, serve us, and obey us in all things. Those who serve faithfully will be blessed. Those who resist will be destroyed. Jin-ho was hiding in an abandoned factory outside Seoul with his brother, Taemin, and about 20 other people who had refused to return to the city. They watched Vextar's speech on a laptop that Taemin had connected to the internet through a satellite link. This is insane, said Haijin, a scientist from Seoul National University who had joined their group. They're not gods. They're just aliens with advanced technology. Tell that to the military bases they erased, said Woojin, a pilot whose squadron had been destroyed in the first attack. I saw it happen. There's nothing left but holes in the ground. That doesn't make them gods, Haijin insisted. It makes them dangerous, but not gods. Jin-ho had been thinking the same thing. Gods were supposed to be perfect, all-knowing beings. These Corvani seemed more like conquerors with powerful weapons. But their weapons were so advanced that they Might as well be magic over the following weeks. The Corvani established their rule over Earth. They built strange temples in every city and forced humans to gather there twice a day for worship ceremonies. The ceremonies involved bowing before Corvani, priests and chanting prayers in the Corvani language. The aliens also established a new social order. At the top were the Corvani themselves, the divine beings. Below them were humans who collaborated with the aliens, called blessed servants. These humans were given better food, housing, and treatment in exchange for helping to control the rest of humanity. At the bottom were ordinary humans called faithful cattle. The name made Jinho's blood boil. Cattle, that's how these aliens saw humans. As farm animals to be used and controlled, the Corvani also began taking humans for what they called divine testing. People would be selected randomly and taken to the alien ships. Most never returned. Those who did come back were changed. They moved strangely and spoke in monotone voices about the glory of serving the gods. Jinho's group grew larger as more people escaped from the cities. They found an underground facility that had been used to store emergency supplies during the Cold War. It was hidden deep in the mountains and had its own power supply. Taemin was able to tap into communication networks without being detected. "I've been monitoring their transmissions," Taemin told the group during one of their evening meetings. "The Corvani aren't just here for worship. They're strip mining our planet. They're taking everything, metals, water, even the air from certain areas." "What do they need all those resources for?" asked Subin, a former university student who had become their best scout. "I don't know," Taemin said, "but I don't think they plan to keep us around forever. The transmissions I've intercepted suggest this is temporary. They've done this before to other planets." The group fell silent. Jinho looked around at the faces of his friends and family. These people were depending on him to find a way to fight back, but how could they fight beings with such incredible power? "There has to be a way," Jinho said finally. "They're not really gods. They're just aliens with technology we don't understand yet. Every technology has weaknesses, but what can we do?" asked Young-soo, a factory worker who had lost his entire family in the first attacks. "We have guns and they have ships that can erase cities. We learn," said Haijin. "We watch them, study them, figure out how their technology works. Every conqueror in history has eventually been defeated. These aliens won't be any different." Jinho nodded. Haijin was right. The Corvani might have superior technology, but they were still living beings. They could be beaten. It would take time, patience, and sacrifice, but it could be done. As he looked out at the group of humans who had refused to bow to false gods, Jinho felt something he had not felt since the ships first appeared: hope. These aliens had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated humanity's refusal to accept slavery, no matter how powerful their masters claimed to be. 6 months had passed since the Corvani arrived, and Earth had become a very different place. Jinho crouched behind the ruins of a shopping center, watching the morning worship ceremony in what used to be Seoul's main square. Hundreds of humans knelt in perfect rows before a massive Corvani temple that had been built over the old city hall. The temple was a twisted spire of black metal and glowing crystals that reached high into the sky. Strange symbols covered its surface, and the air around it shimmered with energy that made Jinho's skin crawl. At the base of the temple, 3 Corvani priests stood on a raised platform, their staffs glowing as they led the humans in chanted prayers. "Blessed are the divine Corvani," the humans chanted in unison, their voices echoing off the ruined buildings. "We are grateful for their guidance. We offer our lives in service to our gods." Jinho felt sick watching his people bow before these aliens. Many of the humans in the square were people he had known before the invasion: shopkeepers, teachers, office workers. Now they knelt in the dirt, praising creatures that saw them as cattle. "It's getting worse," whispered Subin, who was lying next to him behind a pile of broken concrete. "They're holding ceremonies 3 times a day now instead of 2. And look at the people. They're getting thinner." She was right. The humans in the square looked underfed and exhausted. The Corvani provided just enough food to keep their slaves alive, but nothing more. Meanwhile, the aliens lived in luxury. In their floating palaces above the cities. Jinho pulled out his binoculars and focused on one of the blessed servants standing near the temple. The man was wearing the blue robes that marked him as a human collaborator. His face was well-fed and clean, unlike the worshippers. Jinho recognized him. It was Park, a former government official who had quickly switched sides after the invasion. "Target acquired," Jinho whispered into his radio. "Park is at the temple. He's got 2 Corvani guards with him." The voice of Dong Haiyan crackled back through the radio. "Copy that. We're in position on the north side. Haijin, what's your status?" "Ready," came Haijin's voice. "The scanning equipment is set up. If this works, we should be able to record their energy signatures during the ceremony." This was their first real intelligence mission. Haijin had spent months building scanning equipment from salvaged electronics. She believed that by studying the Corvani technology during their religious ceremonies, they might learn something useful about how their power worked. The ceremony continued below. The Corvani priests raised their staffs and beams of light shot into the sky. The humans gasped in wonder and bowed lower. To them, this was proof of divine power. To Jinho, it was just another technology to be understood and defeated. "I'm getting readings," Haijin whispered over the radio. "The energy patterns are strange. It's not like anything I've seen before, but it's definitely technology, not magic." After the ceremony ended, the humans shuffled away to their jobs. Some went to factories that had been converted to produce materials for the Corvani. Others went to farms that now grew food specifically for the alien overlords. The lucky ones worked as servants in the temples, cleaning and maintaining the alien structures. Jinho and Subin waited until the area was clear, then made their way back to their hidden base in the mountains. The journey took 3 hours on foot through the ruins of the suburbs. Everywhere they looked, they saw signs of the Corvani occupation. Human homes had been torn down to make room for alien structures. Parks had been turned into landing pads for Corvani shuttles. The river that ran through the city now glowed with strange chemicals that the aliens dumped into it. When they reached the underground base, they found the others waiting for them. The group had grown to over 50 people now. Some were former soldiers like Dong Haiyan. Others were scientists like Haijin. Many were just ordinary people who refused to bow to the aliens. "What did you learn?" asked Taemin, looking up from a bank of computer screens. "The humans are getting weaker," Subin reported. "Food rations have been cut again, and the Corvani are taking more people for their experiments." "I intercepted some communications today," Taemin said. "The aliens are calling it biological research. They're studying human physiology, brain chemistry, genetic structure. I think they're trying to figure out the best way to control us. Or the best way to replace us," added Wu Jing grimly. "I saw ships landing near the old airport. They're bringing in some kind of creatures. Not Corvani, something else? Workers maybe, or soldiers?" Haijin was analyzing the data from her scanners. "I need more time to study these readings, but I'm seeing something interesting. The Corvani technology seems to require enormous amounts of energy. Those light shows they do during ceremonies, they're not just for intimidation. I think they're actually draining power from somewhere." "What kind of power?" Jinho asked. "I'm not sure yet. But every time they use their weapons or their flying abilities, there's a massive energy spike followed by a period where their equipment runs at lower levels. It's like they have batteries that need time to recharge." This was the first potentially useful intelligence they had gathered. If the Corvani technology had limitations, that meant it could be countered somehow. "There's something else," said Mi Young, who had been working as a doctor treating injured resistance members. "I've been examining some of the humans who escaped from the alien ships. The ones who were taken for experiments and came back." "What did you find?" Jinho asked. "They've been altered," Mi Young said. "Their brain chemistry has been changed. The aliens implanted small devices in their skulls, some kind of control mechanism. But here's the interesting part. The devices can be removed. I successfully extracted one yesterday. She held up a small, crystalline object no bigger than a grain of rice. It pulsed with a faint light. The person it came from is recovering, Mi-young continued. Their personality is starting to return to normal. Whatever the Corvani are doing to control people, it's reversible. This was huge news. It meant that the humans who had been blessed by the aliens were not lost forever. They could be saved. We need to be careful, warned Dong Hyan. If we start removing these things from too many people, the aliens will notice. They'll increase security. Then we need to be smart about it, Jin-ho said. We pick our targets carefully. Start with people who have access to useful information or strategic locations. Over the following weeks, the resistance group began their first real operations. They kidnapped collaborators and removed their control implants. They sabotaged alien supply lines. They rescued humans who were being taken for experiments. Each small victory taught them more about their enemy. The Corvani were powerful, but they were not invincible. They relied heavily on their technology and seemed confused when that technology was damaged or disrupted. They also appeared to have limited numbers. Jin-ho's group never saw the same Corvani twice, which suggested that there were not very many of them on Earth. Most importantly, the aliens seemed to genuinely believe that they were gods. This made them arrogant and careless. They never expected humans to fight back in any organized way. To them, humans were primitive creatures who should be grateful for alien guidance. They've conquered other worlds before, Tamin reported after intercepting more communications. I'm picking up references to something called the Divine Protocol. It seems to be their standard method for taking over planets. They arrive, demonstrate overwhelming power, declare themselves gods, and then wait for the population to submit completely. How many worlds have they taken? Asked Haijin. At least 12 that I can count from their records, maybe more. And it's worked every time? Apparently, until now. Jin-ho looked around at his fellow humans. They were tired, hungry, and outnumbered by billions to one. But they had something the Corvani did not expect, the refusal to accept slavery. Every other species the aliens had conquered had eventually submitted to their rule. Humans were different. Then we're their first real problem, Jin-ho said. They don't know how to handle a species that won't stay down. That night, as Jin-ho looked out at the lights of the alien ships hanging over the distant city, he allowed himself a small smile. The Corvani thought they were gods ruling over grateful worshippers. But down in the darkness, humanity was learning, planning, and preparing to show these false gods what happened when they tried to enslave the wrong species. Haijin worked by candlelight in the deepest part of their underground base, surrounded by salvaged equipment and handwritten notes. She had been studying the Corvani energy signatures for 3 months now, and finally the pieces were starting to come together. Jin-ho, you need to see this, she called out. Not looking up from her calculations, Jin-ho made his way through the narrow tunnels to Haijin's makeshift laboratory. The space had once been a storage room, but now it was filled with electronic equipment that hummed and blinked in the darkness. Haijin had built most of it herself from parts salvaged from the ruins above. What did you find? Jin-ho asked, looking at the equations covering every surface of the walls. They're not gods, Haijin said, a note of excitement in her voice. I can prove it now. Look at this. She pointed to a series of wave patterns displayed on a small screen. These are the energy readings I took during their ceremonies. At first, I thought it was some kind of unknown physics. But I've been comparing it to theoretical models of quantum field manipulation, and it matches perfectly. Jin-ho studied the screen, but the technical details were beyond him. What does that mean in simple terms? It means their power comes from machines, Haijin explained. Very advanced machines that can manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. To us, it looks like magic. But it's just technology we don't understand yet. But their weapons can erase entire buildings, Jin-ho said. They can fly without wings. How is that just technology? Think of it this way, Haijin said, pulling up another screen. 1,000 years ago, a radio would have seemed like magic to humans. 100 years ago, television would have been impossible to believe. The Corvani are maybe 1,000 years ahead of us technologically, but they're still bound by the same laws of physics that we are. She showed him a detailed analysis of a Corvani staff. I managed to scan one of their weapons during yesterday's raid. Look at the internal structure. It's incredibly complex, but it's still a machine. There are power sources, processing units, field generators. All of it follows known scientific principles, just applied in ways we haven't figured out yet. This was exactly what Jinho had hoped to hear. If the Corvani were using technology instead of actual divine power, then their technology could be understood, copied, or defeated. What about their physical abilities? Jinho asked. I've seen them survive injuries that would kill a human. Enhanced biology, probably genetic modification, Haijin said. Their physical forms have been altered to work with their technology. But that also means they have weaknesses we might be able to exploit, Young-Soo appeared in the doorway. Jinho, we have a problem. Dong Haiyan's team ran into trouble during their supply run. Jinho and Haijin quickly made their way to the main command area, where Taemin was coordinating communications. Dong Haiyan's voice crackled over the radio, tense with urgency. We're pinned down in Sector 7, Dong Haiyan reported. 3 Corvani. Patrol units found us near the old factory. They've got some kind of new scanning equipment. I think they're getting better at tracking us. How many casualties? Jinho asked. 2 wounded, no deaths yet, but we can't move. Every time we try to change position, they lock onto us immediately. Jinho looked at the tactical map displayed on Taemin's screens. Sector 7 was only 3 kilometers from their base. If the Corvani were improving their tracking technology, nowhere would be safe. Fall back to position Delta, Jinho ordered. We'll create a distraction to draw them off. Wait, Haijin said, studying the energy readings coming from the Corvani scanners. Let me try something first. She grabbed a device she had been working on, a modified radio. Transmitter connected to a series of capacitors and crystals salvaged from Corvani equipment. She had been calling it a quantum disruptor, though she was not sure if it would actually work. This is theoretical, she warned. But if I'm right about how their technology works, this should interfere with their scanning equipment. She activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Dong Haiyan's voice came over the radio, filled with surprise. The scanning stopped, he reported. The Corvani looked confused. Their equipment is flashing red lights. Move now, Jinho ordered. Get back to base before they figure out what happened. 20 minutes later, Dong Haiyan's team arrived at the base, carrying the wounded and looking shaken but alive. Dong Haiyan immediately sought out Haijin. What did you do? He asked. 1 second, their scanners were tracking our every move. The next second, they were stumbling around like they were blind. I disrupted their quantum field generators, Haijin explained. It's like jamming a radio signal, but much more complex. The device I built creates interference patterns that confuse their equipment. Can you make more of these disruptors? Jinho asked. With enough time and materials, yes. But we'll need more Corvani components. And each device can only work for a few minutes before burning out. Then we'll get you what you need, Jinho said. This is our first real weapon against them. Over the following weeks, Jinho organized raids specifically to capture Corvani technology. It was dangerous work. The aliens had increased security after the first successful disruption, but gradually they accumulated enough components for Haijin to build a dozen disruptor devices. The first field test came when Mi Young's medical team attempted to rescue a group of humans being taken for experimentation. The transport convoy was guarded by 6 Corvani soldiers and 2 hover vehicles. Disruptors active, Haijin whispered into her radio from her position on a hilltop overlooking the road. You have 60 seconds before they burn out. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Corvani soldiers suddenly stopped moving in their perfectly coordinated patterns. Their weapons sparked and flickered. The hover vehicles dropped to the ground with loud crashes. Dong Haiyan's assault team moved in quickly, using conventional weapons to overwhelm the confused aliens. For the first time since the invasion, humans killed Corvani soldiers in direct combat. They're not invincible, Dong Hyan reported over the radio, breathing heavily. Strip away their technology and they're just tall, skinny aliens with good reflexes. The rescued humans confirmed what Mi Young had suspected. The Corvani were conducting extensive biological experiments on human subjects, trying to understand human psychology and physiology. Some of the experiments were clearly designed to find better ways to control the human population. "They're studying our brain chemistry," one of the rescued scientists told them. "They want to know why some humans resist their control implants, while others accept them completely. They're trying to develop a version that will work on everyone." This news was both terrifying and encouraging. It was terrifying because it meant the Corvani were actively working to remove humanity's ability to resist. But it was encouraging because it proved that the aliens saw human resistance as a real threat, worth studying. Tay-Min had been monitoring Corvani communications and noticed increased activity in their command networks. "They're definitely worried about something," he reported. "I'm seeing references to protocol deviations and unexpected resistance patterns. They're not used to dealing with organized opposition." "Good," Jinho said. "Let's give them more to worry about." The resistance began expanding their operations. They used the quantum disruptors to attack Corvani supply lines, rescue more human prisoners, and sabotage alien construction projects. Each success taught them more about their enemy's weaknesses. The most important discovery came when they captured an intact Corvani communication device. Taemin spent days learning how to access its memory banks, and what he found changed everything. "They're not from a single planet," he announced to the group during their evening meeting. "The Corvani Empire is spread across dozens of star systems. But here's the interesting part. They're not actually native to any of those systems. They're nomads." "What do you mean?" asked Subin. "I mean, they move from planet to planet, strip mining resources and enslaving populations until there's nothing left, then move on to the next world. They don't have a home planet to go back to. Their ships are their entire civilization. That explains why they're so good at the Divine Ruler Act," Haijin said. "They've had lots of practice." "But it also means they have a weakness," Jinho realized. "If their ships are destroyed, they have nowhere to go. No reinforcements, no supply lines, nothing." The mood in the room shifted as the implications sank in. The Corvani were not an infinite empire with endless resources. They were a relatively small group of nomadic raiders who depended entirely on the ships currently orbiting Earth. "How many ships do they have?" Jinho asked. Tae-Min checked his notes. "Based on the communication logs, I count 15 major vessels and maybe 50 smaller support craft. Total population is probably around 10,000 Corvani, plus whatever slave soldiers they've brought from other worlds. 10,000 against 7 billion humans." The odds suddenly seemed much more manageable. "They're not gods," Jinho said. Looking around at his fellow humans, "they're parasites. And it's time we showed them what happens when parasites pick the wrong host." Taemin's fingers moved quickly across the modified Corvani communication device, his face lit by the alien symbols scrolling across its screen. After weeks of learning their language and technology, he had finally broken into their main communication network. What he was about to do would change everything. "Are you sure about this?" Jinho asked, standing behind his brother in the cramped communications room of their underground base. "The broadcast will reach every human on Earth who has access to a screen or radio," Taemin confirmed. "The Corvani use the same networks they forced us to build for their worship ceremonies. They never thought we'd be able to turn their own system against them." Around them, the entire resistance leadership had gathered. Haijin checked her quantum disruptors one final time. Dong Hyan and his assault teams were positioned at key locations around the region, ready to handle any immediate Corvani response. Subin and her scouts were monitoring all approaches to the base. "Remember," Jinho said, "once we do this, there's no going back. The Corvani will know we have access to their technology. They'll hunt us with everything they have." "Good," said Young Su, cleaning his rifle. "I'm tired of hiding." Taemin looked at his brother. "The recording is ready." Just give me the word. Jinho took a deep breath. For 8 months, humanity had lived under the boot of false gods. Today that ended. Do it. Taemin pressed a sequence of symbols on the alien device. Across the Earth, every screen controlled by the Corvani network suddenly flickered and changed. Instead of the usual propaganda broadcasts, humans saw something that made many of them gasp in shock. The recording showed the interior of a Corvani ship captured during one of their recent raids. Corvani technicians were working on their divine equipment, replacing power cells and running diagnostic tests on their weapons. The audio included conversations between the aliens, translated into various human languages by Taemin's software. The power coupling on Staff Unit 77 Alpha needs replacement, one Corvani technician said in the recording. The quantum field generator is operating at only 60% efficiency. Use spare parts from the human orbital platforms, another replied. The biological samples from Sector 12 showed promising results. The human brain chemistry responds well to fear-based conditioning. But the most damaging part of the recording came at the end, when a Corvani officer was discussing humans. With his subordinates, the local population remains stable, the officer said. Resistance activity is minimal and easily contained. Continue standard biological harvesting for the weapons research program. When we reach optimal resource extraction levels, implement final phase protocols and prepare for departure to the next target system. The recording ended with a clear view of a Corvani engineer removing his divine robes to reveal the mechanical control systems built into his clothing. The mystical staff he carried was shown to be a complex piece of technology with visible power indicators and maintenance panels. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Within hours, Taemin's communication intercepts showed panic spreading through Corvani command channels. Riot suppression teams were deployed to cities around the world as human populations reacted to the truth about their gods. They're calling it a critical protocol violation, Taemin reported, monitoring the alien communications. They're demanding immediate location and termination of all resistance cells. Let them come, Jinho said. We're ready. The first Corvani response came within 6 hours. 3 attack ships converged on their general area, using advanced scanners to search for the source of the broadcast. But Hyjin's quantum disruptors had been positioned in a wide circle around their base, creating a dead zone where Corvani technology functioned poorly. Their scanners are picking up ghost signals all over the region, Hyjin reported from her monitoring station. They can't get a clear fix on our location. The frustrated Corvani began a systematic search, landing troops at various points and examining them on foot. This was exactly what Jinho had hoped for. In their ships, the aliens were nearly invincible. On the ground, stripped of their technological advantages by the disruptors, they were vulnerable. Dong Hyun's assault team struck the first landing party at dawn. Using hit-and-run tactics, they ambushed the Corvani soldiers as they moved through the ruins of a suburban neighborhood. The quantum disruptors disrupted the aliens' equipment, while conventional human weapons proved effective against their physical forms. First landing party eliminated, Dong Hyun reported. Captured 3 intact weapons and a full set of armor, 1 prisoner. The prisoner was a revelation. Without his technological enhancements, the Corvani soldier was physically weak and clearly afraid. Under questioning by Myung, who had learned some of the Corvani language, he revealed information that changed their understanding of the enemy. His name is Kethver, Myung reported. He's not a warrior, he's an engineer who was pressed into military service because they're running low on actual soldiers. According to him, most of the Corvani and the assault teams are civilians with minimal combat training. They're spread too thin, Hyjin realized. 10,000 aliens trying to control 7 billion humans. They've had to draft their entire population just to maintain control. This explained why the Corvani relied so heavily on their technology and their divine image. They simply did not have the numbers to control Earth through force alone. They needed humans to police themselves through fear and worship. But now that fear was turning into anger, Reports came in from around the world of human uprisings. The broadcast had shown people that their gods were mortal beings with machines that could break down. In cities across Earth, humans were attacking Corvani installations, destroying temples, and hunting down collaborators. Shanghai has driven out all Corvani forces, Taemin reported, reading intercepted communications. Moscow is in open revolt. The aliens have lost control of most major population centers. The Corvani response was swift and brutal. High Regent Vextar appeared on all remaining communication channels, his image flickering with rage. Faithless cattle, he snarled. You dare to question your gods? You dare to raise your hands against divine beings? Your insolence will be punished. The punishment came in the form of orbital bombardment. Cities that had revolted were struck by energy beams from the Corvani ships. But instead of the precise, building-erasing strikes they had used during the invasion, these attacks were crude and destructive. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble, killing thousands of humans indiscriminately. They're panicking, Hyjin observed, watching the attacks on satellite feeds. Look at the energy discharge patterns. They're using maximum power settings on everything. They're burning through their energy reserves at an unsustainable rate. Desperate animals lash out when cornered, Jinho said. But this proves they're not invincible gods. Gods don't panic. The orbital bombardments had an effect opposite to what Vextar intended. Instead of terrorizing humans back into submission, the crude slaughter only fueled more resistance. The careful image of benevolent divine rule was completely shattered. Now everyone could see the Corvani for what they really were, raiders and murderers. Kyung-ho, a former telecommunications expert who had joined the resistance, brought important news from his monitoring of global communications. Resistance cells have formed on every continent, he reported. They're using our broadcast techniques to coordinate attacks. The cell in Brazil captured an entire Corvani supply depot without losing a single person. The group in Australia figured out how to jam Corvani shuttles. They've shot down 12 ships in the last 2 days. What about weapons and equipment? Dong Hyan asked. That's the best part, Kyung-ho said with a grin. Every successful attack gives us more Corvani technology to study and reverse engineer. The cell in Germany has already built their own quantum disruptors based on our designs. The Japanese group has modified Corvani energy weapons for human use. Jinho looked at the tactical displays showing resistance activity around the world. Red dots marked Corvani-controlled areas, while blue dots showed regions under human control. For 8 months, the map had been almost entirely red. Now patches of blue were spreading like a virus across every continent. They made a critical error, Jinho said. They tried to rule through fear and worship instead of just wiping us out completely. They gave us time to learn, to adapt, to figure out their weaknesses. Why didn't they just kill everyone immediately? Asked Subin. Because they needed us, Hyjin answered. The intercepted communications mentioned biological research, resource extraction, slave labor. They can't strip mine an entire planet with only 10,000 workers. They needed humans to do the work for them. But now they've lost control of their workforce, Mi Young added. And they can't run their operation without us. Taemin's equipment suddenly lit up with new activity. I'm getting massive communication traffic from the Corvani fleet, he announced. They're calling for reinforcements. The room fell silent. If more Corvani ships arrived, all of their progress could be wiped out in hours. How long before reinforcements arrive? Jinho asked. Tae-min worked frantically to decode the transmissions. After several tense minutes, he looked up with a strange expression on his face. They're not getting. The attack began at dawn on 3 continents simultaneously. Jinho watched from his command position as hundreds of blue dots moved across the tactical display, each one representing a human resistance cell launching coordinated strikes against Corvani installations. Operation Godfall is active, Kyung-ho announced from his communications station. All resistance cells are reporting ready status. For 2 weeks, Jinho and the other resistance leaders had been planning this moment. The worldwide broadcast had given them contact with human fighters across the globe. Now, working together, they would test whether the Corvani could be defeated through conventional warfare. Brazil team reports successful infiltration of the Snow Paulo Command Center. Kim Kyung-ho continued, reading incoming messages. Australian forces have disabled the Corvani scanner. Array in Perth, European cells are beginning their assault on the London Temple complex. Hyjin was monitoring Corvani communications from her station. Their command network is in chaos, she reported. They're trying to coordinate responses to over 200 simultaneous attacks. Their officers are screaming at each other in panic. The first major victory came from Dong Hyen's assault team, which had been tasked with capturing a Corvani supply depot 15 kilometers north of their base. Using quantum disruptors to blind the alien sensors, his team had approached the facility under cover of darkness. Target secured, Dong Hyen's voice crackled over the radio. We have captured intact power generators, weapon manufacturing equipment, and what looks like their main computer database for this region. Casualties. 3 wounded, no deaths. What about Corvani casualties? Jinho asked. 15 dead, 6 captured alive. Jinho, you need to see this. These aren't the same aliens we fought before. These ones look different. Within an hour, Dong Hyen's team had brought their prisoners back to the base. Mi Young examined them while Hyjin analyzed the captured equipment. What they found confirmed their worst suspicions about Corvani society. These aren't Corvani, Mi Young announced after her examination. They're from a different species entirely. Look at the bone structure, the skin texture, the eye placement. They're not even close to the same evolutionary line. Slave soldiers, Hyjin concluded, studying data from the captured computers. According to these records, the Corvani have been conscripting warriors from other conquered worlds. These particular soldiers are called Vorthek. They're from a planet the Corvani conquered about 50 years ago. Jinho looked at the alien prisoners through the reinforced glass of their holding cell. The creatures were shorter and more muscular than the tall, thin Corvani. Their skin was gray-green and covered with natural armor plating. They looked like they had been bred for war. Can they understand us? Jinho asked. Some human language, yes, Mi Young replied. One of them has been trying to communicate. He keeps saying no gods over and over. Jinho entered the holding cell, accompanied by Mi Young as a translator. The lead Vorthik prisoner looked up at him with eyes that showed intelligence. And something that might have been hope? You ... gods? The creature asked in broken English. We fight the Corvani? Jinho replied. They are not gods. They are conquerors like they conquered your world. The Vorthak's expression changed dramatically. He began speaking rapidly in his own language, which Mi Young translated as best she could. He says his people were forced to serve the Corvani after their world was destroyed. The Corvani promised divine protection but delivered only slavery. He wants to know if we can really defeat them. Tell him we're trying, Jinho said. Ask him if his people would fight alongside us. The conversation that followed changed everything. The Vorthik revealed that there were slave soldiers from dozens of different species serving in the Corvani fleet. Most had been conscripted from worlds that the Corvani had stripped of resources and then abandoned. These soldiers had no loyalty. To their alien masters, they served only because they had no choice. How many slave soldiers are there? Jinho asked. The Vorthak held up his hands multiple times, trying to indicate a large number. Mi Young worked out that he was suggesting thousands of non-Corvani troops were stationed on the ships above Earth. If we could turn them against the Korvani ... Hyjin began. We'd have allies inside their own fleet, Jinho finished. Aliens who know their ships, their technology, their weaknesses. Taemin suddenly called out from his station. Major developments worldwide. The resistance cells have captured functioning Corvani aircraft in 6 different locations. Teams in Russia, India, and Mexico are reporting successful shoots-downs of Corvani shuttles using modified energy weapons. The tactical display showed a dramatic shift in the battle situation. What had started as hit-and-run raids was becoming actual territorial conquest. Humans were not just destroying Corvani installations, they were taking control of them. Yunji, what's our supply situation? Jinho asked their logistics coordinator. Better than expected, Yunji replied, checking her inventory screens. Every captured Corvani facility gives us more equipment than we can use immediately. We're actually starting to run out of people who know how to operate their technology. Then, we need to learn faster, Jinho said. Hi Jin, how quickly can we train people to use Corvani weapons and equipment? With the right instructors, maybe a week for basic proficiency, Hai Jin answered. The technology is intuitive once you understand the underlying principles, but we'll need to modify everything for human physiology. Young Su appeared at Jinho's shoulder. Jinho, you need to hear this communication intercept. The Corvani are discussing something called Purge Protocol. The room went quiet. Taemin played back the intercepted transmission, which featured High Regent Vextar speaking to his senior commanders. The cattle have proven incapable of proper divine worship, Vextar's translated voice said. Resistance levels exceed acceptable. Parameters for resource extraction operations. Authorization requested for Purge Protocol implementation. What's Purge Protocol? Subin asked. Tae-Min worked frantically to cross-reference the term in the Corvani database they had captured. When he found the answer, his face went pale. It's planetary sterilization, he said quietly. They're planning to kill every living thing on Earth and strip mine the planet without any biological interference. The implications hit everyone immediately. The Corvani had given up on controlling humanity. Now they just wanted to eliminate the problem entirely. How long before they can implement this protocol? Jinho asked. According to their technical specifications, they need to reconfigure their main weapon systems, Haijin said, analyzing the data. The energy requirements are enormous. They'll have to drain power from all non-essential systems and focus everything into their planetary bombardment arrays. Estimated time for preparation, 72 hours. 3 days. Humanity had 3 days to defeat the Corvani fleet or face complete extinction. Can we stop them? Dong Hyam asked. Not from the ground, Haijin admitted. The bombardment will come from orbit. We'd need to take the fight to their ships. Then that's what we'll do, Jinho said with grim determination. How many functioning Corvani aircraft have we captured? Kyung-ho checked his global communications network. 17 confirmed captures, with more being reported every hour. The problem is getting pilots who can fly them. I can fly, said Wu Jin, the former military pilot. Give me a few hours to study their flight systems and I can probably handle one of their shuttles. I used to work on aircraft engines, added Haiyan Wu, an aerospace engineer who had joined them recently. If their technology is as logical as... Haijin says I might be able to figure out their larger ships. Jinho looked around at his team, scientists, soldiers, engineers, and ordinary people who had refused to bow to false gods. They were talking about assaulting a fleet of advanced alien warships with captured equipment they barely understood, and somehow the idea did not seem impossible. The Vorthek prisoner, Jinho said suddenly. Ask him if he knows the layout of the Corvani ships. If his people want freedom, they can help us find our way around up there. Mi-young translated the question. The Vorthak's response was immediate and enthusiastic. He says his people know every ship in the fleet, Mi-young reported. They've been maintaining the vessels for decades. He can provide detailed maps, security protocols, even the location of critical systems. Then we have our inside help, Jinho said. It's time to take this fight where the Corvani think they're safe. As reports continued to pour in from around the world, Jinho realized that humanity had already achieved something unprecedented in Corvani history. They had successfully resisted the divine protocol and forced their would-be gods to resort to desperate measures, but the real test was still to come. In 72 hours, they would either be free or extinct. There would be no middle ground. Get me a connection to every resistance cell on the planet, Jinho ordered. It's time to Tell them that the gods are planning to end the world, and it's time to ask them if they want to storm heaven itself to stop it." The captured Corvani command ship hung in space like a metallic mountain, its hull scarred by human weapons and its lights flickering erratically. Jin-Ho floated through its corridors in a salvaged environment suit, following the Vorthak guide, who had volunteered to help them navigate the alien vessel. The assault on the ship had taken 18 hours of brutal fighting. Wu Jin had led a squadron of captured Corvani shuttles in a desperate attack on the vessel's docking bays, while Hian Wu's engineering team had disabled its main weapons from the inside using intelligence provided by the slave soldiers who had turned against their masters. Command center. Here, the Vorthak guide said in his broken English, pointing to a sealed doorway marked with Corvani symbols. Ship brain. All control. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, Jin-Ho could see the Earth below, its surface dotted with the lights of human cities that were no longer under alien control. But he could also see the other Corvani ships, still orbiting the planet, and still preparing their doomsday weapons. "Jin-Ho, we've got the ship's computer core," Haijin's voice crackled through his radio. She was working in the ship's engineering section with a team of human technicians and liberated alien slaves. "The amount of information here is incredible. I'm looking at the complete technical specifications for every piece of Corvani technology." "What about their weapons?" Jin-Ho asked. "Can we stop the purge protocol?" "I'm still analyzing the data, but yes, I think we can." The planetary bombardment system requires all ships to link their weapons into a single coordinated array. If we can disrupt that link, the other ships won't have enough power to sterilize the planet, Jin-Ho finished. "How do we disrupt it?" "We need to access the main communication hub on their flagship," Haijin replied. "It's the ship that coordinates all the others. According to these schematics, it's 3 times larger than this vessel and heavily defended." Dong Haiyan's voice joined the conversation from his position in the ship's armory. "We've got bigger problems. I've found their biological weapons storage. Jin-Ho, they weren't just planning to kill everyone with energy weapons. They've got viruses, chemical agents, genetic modification tools. They were going to experiment on us before wiping us out." The discovery sent a chill through Jin-Ho's spine. The Corvani had not just been planning genocide, they had been planning to torture humanity first, using them as test subjects for weapons they would use on the next species they encountered. "All the more reason to make sure they never get the chance," Jin-Ho said grimly. "How many ships have we captured or destroyed so far?" Kyung-Ho's voice came through from the communications center. "Global count is 7 ships captured, 12 destroyed. But that still leaves over 40 Corvani vessels in orbit, including their flagship. What about our allies?" Jin-Ho asked, referring to the slave soldiers who had joined the human rebellion. "Better than expected," replied Eunji from her logistics post. "We have Vorthak warriors, Zalani technicians, morphic infiltrators, and at least 6 other species that want revenge on the Corvani. Total count is around 2,000 alien allies, plus whatever humans we can get into space. 2,000 alien allies. A year ago, Jin-Ho would never have imagined fighting alongside creatures from other worlds. But the Corvani had united their enemies through brutality and arrogance. Now, species that had never met before were working together to bring down their common oppressor. "Sir," came a new voice. Jae-sung, the former factory worker who had become one of their best pilots. "I'm getting readings from the flagship. Their energy output is increasing. I think they're starting the charging sequence for the planet killer weapons." Jin-Ho pushed himself through the ship's corridors toward the command center, where human technicians were working frantically to understand the alien control systems. Through the viewports, he could see the Corvani flagship in the distance, its hull pulsing with energy as massive weapon systems came online. "Time estimate?" Jin-Ho asked. 6 hours, Haijin replied after consulting the captured data. "They're drawing power from all non-essential systems across the entire fleet. When they reach full charge, they can crack the planet's crust and boil away the atmosphere. 6 hours to storm the most heavily defended ship in the Corvani fleet. It seemed impossible, but Jinho had learned that impossible was just another word for difficult. B.O.R.A. Get me a connection to every resistance cell that has access to spacecraft, Jinho ordered. We're going to need every ship we can get. The communications officer worked quickly to establish the links. Within minutes, Jinho was speaking to resistance leaders from around the world, all of them coordinating the final assault on the Corvani fleet. This is it, Jinho announced to the Global Resistance Network. They're charging their planet-killer weapons. We have 6 hours to take their flagship or humanity dies. Every ship, every pilot, every weapon we have, everything goes into this attack. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Resistance cells that had been working independently suddenly began coordinating as a single massive military force. Captured Corvani shuttles lifted off from dozens of countries. Human-built spacecraft that had been hidden in bunkers and caves emerged to join the attack. Even civilian aircraft that had been modified with alien weapons began climbing toward orbit. Jinho, Timon's voice came through the communication system. I'm monitoring Corvani fleet communications. They know we're coming. High Regent Vextar is calling in all his remaining forces to defend the flagship. Let in, Jinho replied. If they concentrate their defenses on one ship, the others will be vulnerable to our allies. The battle plan was simple, but desperate. While the main human fleet attacked the flagship directly, smaller teams of liberated slave soldiers would assault the other Corvani vessels, preventing them from supporting their command ship. It was a strategy that required perfect timing and tremendous sacrifice. As Jinho prepared to transfer to an assault shuttle, the Vorthak guide approached him. The alien warrior had removed the control implants that the Corvani had used to enslave him, and his eyes now burned with the same determination that Jinho had seen in human resistance fighters. Fight with you, the Vorthak said in his improving English. Free all people, no more gods. No more gods, Jinho agreed, clasping the alien's armored hand. The assault fleet that assembled around the captured command ship was unlike anything that had ever existed in human history. Sleek Corvani shuttles flew alongside crude but effective human spacecraft. Vorthak warriors worked side by side with human marines. Zelani technicians shared equipment with human engineers. All ships, this is Jinho, he announced as his shuttle approached the massive Corvani flagship. Remember what we're fighting for. Not just human freedom, but the freedom of every species the Corvani have enslaved. Not just our world, but every world they've destroyed. Today we end their empire forever. The flagship loomed ahead of them, its weapon systems beginning to glow with the energy that would be used to murder billions. But Jinho could also see something else, damage along its hull where other resistance attacks had weakened its defenses. Sections where the lights flickered or had gone out entirely. Signs that even the mighty flagship was not invincible. Hi Jin, can you identify critical systems from the outside? Jinho asked. Working on it, she replied from her position in the engineering shuttle. There, that cluster of towers near the center of the ship. That's their main communication? Array. If we can take that out, they'll lose coordination with the rest of the fleet. And that massive construction on the underside? Asked Wu Jin from his fighter craft. Primary weapon control, Haijin confirmed. Destroy that and they can't fire the planet killer even if they have enough power. All ships, you have your targets, Jinho announced. Let's show these false gods what happens when they threaten. Our home. The assault began with a coordinated strike from 100 different directions. Human fighters dove toward the weapon control systems, while Vorthak's alt ships targeted the communication arrays. Zelani infiltrators used their natural camouflage abilities to sneak through damaged hull sections and sabotage critical systems from within. The Corvani fought back with desperate fury, but they were facing an enemy they had never encountered. The four multiple species working together with a shared purpose. Every time they focused their defenses on the human ships, the alien allies would strike from a different angle. Every time they adapted to one species' tactics, another would surprise them with something completely unexpected. Communication. Array is down, reported one of the Vorthak commanders. Flagship is isolated from fleet coordination. Weapon control systems are damaged but still functional. Wu Jin called out as his fighter strafed the ship's underside. I'm going to need backup on this target. Jinho's shuttle was heading directly for the flagship's main docking bay, where he planned to lead a boarding party into the ship's core. But as they approached, the bay's massive doors began to close. They're sealing themselves in, observed Dong Haiyan from the assault shuttle's gunner position. Then we make our own door, Jinho replied. Ordering their pilot to target the bay doors with everything they had, the shuttle's modified Corvani weapons tore through the alien metal, creating a breach large enough for boarding parties to enter. As the corridors of the Corvani flagship burned with the light of energy weapons and the smoke of battle, Jinho moved through the alien ship with his assault team, following the tactical maps provided by their Vorthek allies. Behind them, human Marines and liberated slave soldiers fought side by side, pushing deeper into what had once been considered the most sacred vessel in the Corvani fleet. Resistance is lighter than expected, reported Dong Haiyan over the radio as his team secured another section of the ship. Most of the Corvani seem to be falling back toward the command center. They're making a final stand, Jinho replied, checking his modified energy rifle. Vexstar knows that if he loses this ship, his entire empire collapses. The ship shuddered around them as the space battle continued outside. Through the viewports, Jinho could see human and alien alliance ships engaging the remaining Corvani fleet. Explosions lit up the darkness as vessels from a dozen different worlds fought together against their former oppressors. Jinho, this is Haijin, came the scientist's voice through the communication system. I'm in the ship's engineering section. The good news is that I found the main power distribution center. The bad news is that the planet killer weapons are at 90% charge? How long before they can fire? Jinho asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. But Jinho, there's something else. I've accessed their historical records. The Corvani have done this to 47 different worlds. 47 entire civilizations wiped out because they wouldn't submit to alien rule. The number hit Jinho like a physical blow. 47 worlds. Billions upon billions of sentient beings murdered because they refused to worship false gods. The magnitude of the Corvani crimes was almost beyond comprehension. Then we ended here, Jinho said grimly. Today the Corvani Empire dies. His team reached a junction where the ship's corridors split in 3 directions. According to their maps, one path led to the command center where Vexstar waited. Another led to the weapon control systems. The third led to the ship's power core. Split up, Jinho ordered. Dong Haiyan, take your team to weapon control. Disable those planet killers no matter what it costs. I'll head for the command center with the boarding party. What about the power core? Asked Young-Soo. I'll handle that, came an unexpected voice. It was the Vorthek guide who had helped them navigate the first ship. He had somehow made his way aboard the flagship with a team of other liberated warriors. Vorthek no ship power. We shut down, Corvani no can fight. Jinho nodded. The plan was simple but effective. Hit the Corvani from 3 directions simultaneously, and prevent them from using their ultimate weapon dot as they moved deeper into the ship. Jinho's team encountered increasingly desperate resistance. Corvani soldiers fought from behind energy barriers, using their advanced weapons to hold off the advancing humans. But for every human that fell, 2 more took their place. The corridors filled with warriors from Earth and a dozen other worlds, all united in their determination to end the Corvani threat forever. This is Biora in communications, came a report from one of the support teams. I've tapped into their internal communication system. The Corvani are in complete panic. Vexstar is ordering his people to activate something called Divine Transcendence Protocol. What's that? Jinho asked, ducking behind cover as Corvani energy beams scorched the wall above his head. Working on it? Haijin's voice replied from engineering. Found it in their database ... Oh no. Jinho, it's a suicide protocol. If they can't complete the planet killer bombardment, they're going to overload their power cores and take us all with them. How big an explosion? Jinho asked, though he already suspected the answer would be bad. Big enough to crack the moon and shower Earth with radioactive debris for the next 1,000 years, Haijin confirmed. Even if we survive the initial blast, the fallout will make the planet uninhabitable. Jinho felt a moment of despair. Even in defeat, the Corvani were planning to murder humanity out of spite. But then he remembered the 47 worlds that had died before Earth, and his resolve hardened. Then we stop them from activating it, he said simply. All teams' priority target is now the command center. We take Vexstar alive and force him to cancel all protocols. The fighting intensified as Jinho's team pushed toward the heart of the ship. The Corvani threw everything they had at the advancing humans, energy weapons, force fields, even some kind of robotic defense drones that fired streams of superheated plasma. But human ingenuity and determination proved superior to alien technology. Hyanwu used a captured Corvani shield generator to protect the advancing troops Subin employed. Her scouting skills to find alternate routes around heavily defended positions. Even Mi Young contributed by treating wounded fighters and getting them back into the battle. Command center in sight, Jinho reported as they reached the final checkpoint. Ahead of them lay a massive door marked with Corvani symbols that their translators identified as divine sanctum only gods may enter. Well, said Wu Jin, checking his weapon, I guess we're about to become gods ourselves. The assault on the command center began with Dong Hyan's team using shape charges to blast through the reinforced door. As the smoke cleared, Jinho could see the vast chamber beyond, a cathedral-like space filled with holographic displays showing the battle raging outside and the status of the planet-killer weapons. At the center of it all stood High Regent Vexstar, no longer the confident divine ruler who had first appeared on Earth's screens. His elaborate robes were torn and scorched. His crown was cracked. His tall, pale form trembled with rage and fear as he saw humans entering his most sacred space. Impossible! Vexstar screamed in his own language, which the team's translators converted to Korean. Cattle cannot enter the divine presence. This is blasphemy. The only blasphemy here is you calling yourself a god, Jinho replied, advancing with his weapon trained on the alien leader. Around them, the command center filled with the sounds of battle as Corvani guards fought desperately to protect their ruler. But the human assault team was supported by liberated slaves who knew every inch of the ship, and gradually they overwhelmed the alien defenses. Planet-killer weapons at 100% charge, reported one of the Corvani technicians in. Panic! Fire them, Vexstar commanded. Destroy this world and everything on it. If we cannot rule, then nothing shall live. But when the technician tried to activate the weapons, nothing happened. Dong Hyan's voice came over the radio with welcome news. Weapon control systems destroyed, he reported. They can charge those guns all they want, but they can't aim or fire them? Vexstar's face contorted with fury. Then activate divine transcendence. If we cannot be gods, we shall die as gods. He moved toward a control panel covered with warning symbols, clearly intending to trigger the ship's self-destruct sequence. But Jinho was faster. A single shot from his energy rifle struck the alien leader in the shoulder, spinning him away from the controls. You're not a god, Jinho said, standing over the fallen Corvani. You're just a bully with big guns. And bullies can bleed. Vexstar looked up at him with eyes full of hatred and disbelief. I am divine, I am eternal. I have conquered 47 worlds, and lost them all to species who refuse to kneel, Jinho replied. Your empire is over, Vexstar. Cancel all protocols and surrender your fleet. Never, the alien spat. I would rather die than submit to cattle. Then you'll die, said a new voice. It was the Vorthik warrior who had guided them through the first ship. He had somehow made his way to the command center despite the intense fighting. But first, you tell truth to Galaxy. The alien pointed to the communication systems that connected the flagship to the rest of the Corvani fleet. All ships here. All slaves here. Tell truth. You know gods. You just thieves and murderers. Vexstar's eyes went wide with horror as he realized what was being asked of him. To publicly admit that the Corvani were not divine beings would destroy the foundation of their empire. Even if they somehow escaped Earth, no future world would bow to them again. The Transcendence Protocol? Hyjin's voice came over the radio. I can disarm it from here, but I need the command codes. Only Vexstar has them. Jinho looked down at the wounded alien leader. Give us the codes and we'll let you live. Keep silent and everyone dies, including you and your precious empire. For a long moment, Vexstar said nothing. Then slowly, the fight seemed to go out of him. He looked around at the humans and liberated aliens surrounding him. And Jinho could see the exact moment when the High Regent realized that his divine pretensions had crumbled into dust. I am not a god, Vexstar whispered, the words seeming to cause him physical pain. We are not gods. We are raiders, parasites. We have no divine right to rule. The admission was broadcast throughout the ship and beyond, reaching every Corvani vessel in the fleet. On the screens around them, Jinho could see alien crews abandoning their posts as the last vestiges of their empire's authority collapsed. The codes, Jinho demanded. With trembling hands, Vexstar entered a complex sequence into the command panel. Immediately, the ship's power systems began cycling down from their dangerous overload levels. Transcendence Protocol cancelled, Hyjin. Confirmed, all weapon systems are powering down. The immediate threat is over. Jinho looked around the command. 3 months after the fall of the Corvani Empire, Jinho stood on the observation deck of the converted flagship. Looking down at Earth, the planet looked different now, cleaner somehow, with the alien industrial scars beginning to heal. Cities were rebuilding, but they were building something new, something that combined human architecture with technology learned from a dozen different worlds. Behind him, the former command center of the Corvani fleet had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. A council chamber where representatives from multiple species worked together as equals. Today was special. Today they would decide the fate of the defeated Corvani. The final count is complete, reported Yinji, who had become the Alliance's chief administrator. We have liberated representatives from 47 different worlds. Every species the Corvani enslaved over the past 2 centuries. Plus delegates from Earth, of course. Jinho nodded, watching as delegates filed into the chamber. There were the stocky, armored Vorthak who had become humanity's closest allies, the tall, graceful Zolani whose camouflage abilities had proven invaluable in the final battles, the crystalline Morphics who communicated through light patterns, dozens of other species, each with their own story of suffering under Corvani rule, and at the center of it all, a small group of humans who had refused to bow to false gods. How are the Corvani survivors? Jinho asked Mi Young, who had been overseeing their medical care and confinement. Physically healthy, but psychologically shattered, she replied. Without their technology and their belief in their own divinity, most of them can barely function. They've lived as parasites for so long that they don't know how to exist as anything else, and Vexstar. He single quotes S... different. The admission that he wasn't a god broke something fundamental in his mind. He keeps asking to speak with you. Jinho had been avoiding the former High Regent, but he knew the conversation had to happen eventually. The other species wanted justice for the crimes committed against their worlds. Some wanted execution. Others wanted slavery, to make the Corvani experience what they had inflicted on others. Bring him to the secondary conference room, Jinho decided. It's time we finish this. 20 minutes later, Jinho found himself face to face with the being who had once claimed to be humanity's god. Vexstar looked smaller somehow, diminished without his elaborate robes and crown. He wore simple clothing and restraints that prevented him from accessing any technology. You wanted to see me? Jinho asked, taking a seat across from the former alien ruler. I have been thinking, Vexstar said in heavily accented but functional Korean. He had been learning human languages during his confinement. About what you said, about gods and mortals. And what conclusion did you reach? That we were never gods? Vexstar admitted, his voice hollow. Gods create. Gods protect. God's sacrifice for their children. We only took, we only destroyed. We were the opposite of gods. Jinho studied the alien's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But all he saw was genuine remorse and confusion. What happened to your people? Jinho asked. How did you become raiders? Vexstar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, as if he was remembering something from long ago. We were dying, he said finally. Our sun was failing, our world was cooling. We developed the technology to travel between stars, but by then there were so few of us left. We told ourselves that we deserved to survive more than other species, that our advanced technology made us superior. Eventually, we convinced ourselves that we were divine beings with the right to rule over lesser creatures. But you weren't dying when you came to Earth, Jinho pointed out. You had ships, resources, power. You could have found empty worlds to colonize instead of enslaving inhabited ones. By then, we had forgotten how to create, Vexstar replied. We only knew how to take. Each conquest made us weaker, more dependent on slaves to maintain our technology and our civilization. We became addicted to worship, to the feeling of being feared and obeyed. Jinho leaned back in his chair. And now we are nothing. Vexstar said, without our slaves, without our technology, without our lies about divinity, we are just a handful of refugees with nowhere to go. The door to the conference room opened, and Haijin entered with a data pad. Jinho, the council, is ready for the final vote. They want to know what you've decided about the Corvani. Jinho looked at Vexstar one more time. The alien met his eyes without flinching, no longer the arrogant ruler who had demanded worship, but not yet something new. What would you do if we released you? Jinho asked. I do not know, Vexstar answered honestly. We have no world to return to, no empire to rebuild, no purpose except to face the truth of what we became. Then maybe it's time you learned a new purpose, Jinhe said, standing up. Come with me. Jinho led Vexstar to the main council chamber, where representatives from 47 worlds waited to hear the fate of their former oppressors. The room fell silent as the former High Regent entered, flanked by human guards. People of the galaxy, Jinho began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. We gathered today not just to decide punishment, but to decide what kind of civilization we want to build from the ashes of the Corvani Empire. He gestured to the assembled delegates. Each of your worlds suffered under Corvani rule. Each of you has the right to demand justice, but I ask you to consider what justice really means. A Vorthic delegate stood up. The Corvani destroyed our world, enslaved our people, used us as weapons against other innocent species. Justice means they should suffer as we suffered. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Many delegates nodded, their expressions hard with memories of loss and pain. You're right, Jinho said. The Corvani did terrible things. They destroyed worlds, enslaved billions, committed genocide on a galactic scale. They deserve punishment. He paused, looking around the room at faces from dozens of different worlds. But what if we could do something better than punishment? What if we could do something that would prevent this from ever happening again? A Zelani delegate spoke up, her words translated into light patterns and then into sound. What do you propose, human Jinho? Redemption through service, Jinho replied. The Corvani will spend the rest of their lives working to undo the damage they caused. They will help rebuild the worlds they destroyed. They will share their knowledge to benefit the species they oppressed. They will serve instead of ruling. And if they refuse? Ostomorphic delegate, its crystalline form pulsing with skeptical colors, Jinho looked directly at Vexstar. Then they will face the traditional justice that many of you demand. But I believe that people can change, even people who have done terrible things. Vexstar stepped forward, his voice shaking but clear. I accept, he said in the common language. That had developed among the Alliance species. My people accept, we will serve, we will try to earn forgiveness we do not deserve. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some delegates argued for execution. Others wanted imprisonment or exile. But gradually a consensus emerged around Jinho's proposal. The Corvani would live, but they would spend their lives working to repair the harm they had caused. There will be conditions, announced the Vorthic delegate who had become the informal leader of the former slave worlds. The Corvani will have no access to advanced weapons. They will be monitored constantly. And if they ever again try to claim divine authority over others, the mercy ends. Agreed, Vextar said immediately. The final vote was close, but Jinho's proposal passed. The Corvani Empire was officially dissolved, its former rulers sentenced to a lifetime of supervised community service on a galactic scale. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Haijin approached Jinho with a smile. "But that was either very wise or very naive," she said. "Maybe both," Jinho replied. "But someone once told me that the measure of a civilization is not how it treats its enemies in victory, but whether it can break the cycle of violence that creates enemies in the first place. Who told you that?" Taemin asked, joining them. "I just made it up," Jinho admitted with a grin. "But it sounded good." Over the following months, the galaxy began to change. The alliance of former slave worlds became something new, a voluntary confederation of species working together for mutual benefit rather than conquest. Trade replaced raiding, cooperation replaced domination. Knowledge was shared freely instead of being hoarded by rulers. The Corvani, true to their agreement, began the long process of making amends. Some worked on ecological restoration projects on damaged worlds. Others shared their technological knowledge to help rebuild destroyed civilizations. A few, including Vextar, became teachers, traveling from world to warn others about the dangers of believing that power made them superior to other species. Jin-Ho often watched them work, wondering if true redemption was possible for beings who had committed such terrible crimes. But gradually he began to see changes. The arrogance faded from their eyes. The casual cruelty disappeared from their actions. Slowly, painfully, they were learning to see other species as equals rather than cattle. 1 year after the fall of their empire, Vextar approached Jinho during a construction project on a Vorthic colony world that had been strip-mined by the Corvani. "I wanted to thank you,"